The Right Honourable Trevor Mallard to make his valedictory speech.
Ka tahi anō o ka watia ki te mihi ki a koe e te mana whakawa e te tūranga hou. I've had the honour, Mr Speaker, of being unanimously elected as a presiding officer 3 times. Ka rohe tō mahi, ka koe hei kaiako moko. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I came to this place with a mission to make New Zealand a more inclusive, more prosperous and a better country. My talk today will involve some thanks, some anecdotes and a bit of preaching. Not much of that preaching will be to the choir. I joined the Labour Party 50 years ago next month after watching Norman Kirk speak. My mother's family had benefited from the first Labour State House building program. A secure, warm home meant the world of difference to that poor family during the Depression. Allowing them to buy it after living in it for decades was a good thing. None of my grandparents had a secondary education, and Peter Fraser made a big difference for my parents. I did some work in that election, and 1975. I became more active after the 1981 election loss. Our home became a meeting place for both wings of the Labour Party, Labour movement. We got to know David Longy and Helen Clark because they stayed with us. There wasn't as much money for travel in those days. I became a candidate in late 1983 in Hamilton. My first day here is etched in my memory. I was walking along the Select Committee corridor with my younger daughter when Sir Robert came the other way. 2-year-old Beth sighted Sir Robert and called out, "Daddy, Daddy, there's Piggy Muldoon." His response was, "What's your name, little girl?" Later in Copperfields, he pointed at me and said in his stage, "That's Mallard Prime Minister, he beat Minogue." "Ah, good on him. We'd better send him a bottle of whiskey, hadn't we?" Like many Muldoon promises, delivery never ensued. I'd like to thank some people. First, you, Prime Minister. Of all the colleagues I've worked with, you've made the biggest difference. You've had challenges like no other. But I'm pleased now that your policies are beginning to get some substantive analysis. The recent report on healthy homes shows how reducing child hospitalisation rates can be done. And anyone who is in touch with their local communities can see the house building that is occurring. Much of it is social housing. We all know new apprentices. Local schools tell me the difference access to mental health services is making. None of these things happen overnight, but they are happening. Your kindness is evident to all, but what I also see is a preparation and the competence that contrasts with what I see far too often here, and it's a combination of lazy high school debating styles and reading boring research unit notes. Both are far too common in this chamber. With the exception of John Key, everyone who's assumed that role in the last quarter of a century has seemingly lost the ability to listen in this House and to respond with spontaneity and nimbleness. Prime Minister, I'm pleased you skipped that role. I've been married to 2 women who've been very supportive of me. In my generation, the wives were often the partner who would have been the better MP. Steph was in that category. My biggest regret is that I caused my first marriage to fail in a way that was catastrophic for my family. My children are all really talented in their different ways. And over the last 13 years, I've been lucky to have 7 grandchildren, 4 of them born in Galway and 4 now living here. Then 7-year-old immigrant, when she arrived here, called me Mr. Talker. And following a meeting with Helen Clark and the current PM, she asked, "Can men be Prime Minister in New Zealand?" The weekly toddlers swimming sessions in the parliamentary pool have helped me get to know my only Wellington-born grandchild, and I want to thank the Copperfield staff for their tolerance when he worked out how to turn the lights off. There were a few occasions when the MPs there were all literally in the dark. Mum and my late father were great supporters. Mum was worth at least 200 votes every election. She collected the sick votes. I'm pretty sure that some of the oldies would feign illness just to get a visit from Mum. Dad played the Tory interjector at a couple of debate training sessions for Helen. He did it too well, and he wasn't invited back. Thanks too for those that have encouraged me to bike. I was 15 kilos heavier when Heather Kirkham took me under her wing. Helen Clark was a confidant, and we got to know each other's foibles. Helen was never a morning person. I worked out the best way to have good cabinet committees was to have lattes delivered at 9:30 and 11. They were amongst the best investments I ever made. One of Helen's biggest achievements was to rid the Labour Party of factionalism, which meant that ideas are now treated on their merits, not on the basis of who is promoting them, in the mindless way that hobbles both the Australian and British Labour parties. David McGee, Geoffrey Palmer, Don McKinnon all helped me understand and love this place. There was a messenger called Trevor who did the evening shift over by the Speaker's door. He gave me running guidance on points of order with a quiet nod, you're heading in the right direction, or a shake, you're down the wrong track. Jerry was one of the doctors who treated drug addiction, and at 6 o'clock there was a queue at the Speaker's door out in the alley of addicts waiting for their daily methadone drink. He was himself a nicotine addict and had about a 40-minute limit in the chair. The last part of question time was always interesting. I was Michael Cullen's Associate Minister of Finance. Every budget had a surplus. I laughed out loud recently when I heard a $10 billion deficit being described as being awash with cash. Mr. Speaker, being around for a long time has meant that lots of staff have worked with me, some for as long as 15 years. I'm naming those who have spent 6 or more. Bill, with Catherine Rich, drove the establishment of the Parliament Education Trust. Nearly 60 MPs have been assisted with study ranging from remedial reading through Institute of Directors courses to postgraduate university study. The people who run this place are underrated. I want to say a special thanks to the low-paid staff who keep this place running. I was very pleased when we became the first state sector workplace to adopt the living wage. Because I've been an MP for a long time, it's inevitable that I've met some interesting international leaders. Gromyko, Rajiv Gandhi, Colin Powell, Mandela, Thatcher and the late Queen could all get little chapters or maybe footnotes in some cases for me. But what I valued much more from travelling is getting to appreciate colleagues from the other side of the house. Philip Burden, John Luxton the Younger, Barbara Kuriger have all taught me much more about international trade and the dairy industry than papers ever could have. We've made some progress here in recent years. Our buildings are more family and dog friendly. Our prayer is no longer an Anglican one. The grounds and buildings are more welcoming to the public. We mostly treat each other better, but we have more work to do. Our select committees used to lead the world, but I think they've become rubber stamps for governments. Members form the legislative branch, and they should take responsibility for legislation. Reform isn't hard. They should sit more. Recesses used to be called select committee weeks. Submitters were heard. half an hour or an hour if they had something really important to say. Committee membership should be based the same way as questions, based on the number of non-executive members a party has. Similarly for chairs. Departments have got to realise that when they are advising committees, they're advising committees and not the minister. Submitters to committees need to know that their submissions will be treated on their merits by committees, not vetoed by a political advisor in a minister's office, who is often breaching privilege by merely being in possession of the committee material. Ministers should trust the process. Let the committees do their work. And if in the end, should trust the select committees to try and improve it. One boys, Haben and Salim, were in a German Catholic orphanage. Mr. Speaker, I've lived for 2/3 of my life in Wainuiomata. The population grew from a few hundred when I was young and we were briefly a city. The reforms of the 1980s and 1990s hit our valley hard, leaving many families in stressed financial circumstances, in danger of losing their homes. Part of my work as an MP at the time was negotiating debt consolidation and mortgage terms. We should use the strength of one of the strongest Crown balance sheets in the world. The time has come to significantly upscale KiwiSaver. And now for the left field suggestion. I've long been concerned that the Reserve Bank only has one instrument other than printing money. They could increase or decrease net pay almost immediately. The policy area that was and is the most important to me is early childhood education. It is where the biggest cognitive and emotional development occurs. We had a great working group and a good 10-year plan. There are signs of renewed progress with it. However, subsidies currently go too often to companies that are more interested in property development and capital gains and quality early childhood education. Throughout the education system, the best way of improving the quality of learning is to improve the quality of teaching. That's why I often agreed with some of my former teacher union colleagues and preferred to invest heavily in teacher professional development rather than focused on improved ratios. Unfortunately, centrally funded support is easy to cut. It was decimated, and in my opinion, teaching standards have been slipping for more than the last decade as a result of that. I enjoyed being Minister of Sport. I've always had appalling popularity ratings and never got too anxious about it. I accept that I'm not that good a politician. I closed over 200 schools. I will never forget being ridiculed by members opposite for undertaking to partner with Rocket Lab. I was described as a space cadet. We now lead the world in carbon fibre technology, something Rocket Lab is built off. We have hydrogen-powered foiling chase boats, which in the next couple of years will be fashion items. Returning with Helen Clark from Sir Peter's funeral led to an incident which probably put my career at biggest risk. And given one or two incidents I've been involved in, that's saying quite a lot. We were on a Virgin Air 747 that had been refurbished. It was actually an old Air New Zealand one, with some of the first lie-down business class seats. I woke in the middle of the night and saw the DPS officer winking at me. I presume he'd woken me up. I was in what might be described as a compromising position. We hadn't put the barrier up between the beds. I gently extricated myself, and if Helen noticed, she was kind enough to never mention it. Mr. Speaker, the time has come for me to say farewell. I've experienced all the highs and lows that politics gives and takes. Others will judge whether New Zealand is more inclusive, prosperous, and a better country, and my role in that. But looking around me, I know that the people who are here will make it a better future. He kona rā.
To